Hey everybody, I'm Michael. This is a review for the second Sammy Keyes book. It's Sammy Keyes and the Skeleton Man. It takes place about a month or two after the first book, Sammy Keyes and the Hotel Thief. I think both books are about equally good. They're good in different ways. They have different strengths and weaknesses, but I think I enjoyed them pretty much the same amount. So I'll give it the same score as I gave the first one, a 9 out of 10. Most reviewers seem split because the book is split. The book is about halfway split between stuff Sammy does at school and Sammy trying to solve the mystery. And the first book was sort of that way as well. So some readers really like the school stuff and they don't like the mystery so much. Other readers, they really love the mystery and they hate the school stuff for getting in the way and having nothing to do with the mystery. So that's what I mean when readers are split. They don't know which part of the book they like. So that seems to be a common consensus, is that the two halves of the book don't mesh together well. I didn't understand that complaint. I thought it was a perfectly fine book. It follows in the footsteps of the first book. It didn't really bother me. The story, I guess the complaint could be that you could swap out the school drama with something else and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It really wouldn't have an effect on the mystery. I guess that's kind of true, but whatever. I thought it was okay because the school stuff introduces a new character named Dot, so that's an interesting move. Sammy's got a new best friend. Her name is Dot, and she met Dot in between the two books, so we don't actually get to see how they met and became friends. It's just they're friends now and they hang out. And they go to Halloween, they go trick-or-treating together. And Dot wants to visit this scary house, which belongs to the Bushman. And Sammy normally would never go there, but it is Halloween, and her one friend, Marissa, does have to use the bathroom pretty badly. So they go there, and what do you know, Sammy just walks upon another crime. Just like the previous book, The Hotel Thief, where Sammy just happens to be watching when a crime is committed. Here, she walks up to a house just as a crime is being committed. The culprit is dressed in a skeleton man costume, is carrying a bag full of valuables. The culprit has just robbed the house and attacked the owner, Chauncey Labard. And Sammy kind of saves his life. And I thought he was a really interesting victim because he seems like a nice guy, but he's also borderline super creepy, and he had a tracheectomy, so he has a hole right here in his throat that he speaks through. And that sort of kind of underlies the fact that he's creepy because he can't really talk that much, and his voice is really raspy and such. So at first she's kind of scared of him. But, he's unconscious, and there's a fire. Yes. So Sammy's costume is a marsh monster costume. So she wore a green sweater belonging to Marissa's mother, this ugly, hideous green sweater, and she uses it to put out the fire. She later learns, wow, it's a valuable $500 sweater. And she's like, oh no, how am I going to get a replacement? So that's her reason for going back to Chauncey and learning a bit more about the mystery. And this comes into play again later, where she's trying to buy new shoes because for her costume she had to dye her shoes green. That's what her friends told her to do. And everyone at school made fun of her for it. So she goes to the store to try to buy new shoes. And what happens? Well, she just discovers some of the stolen items there in the store. It's not a trade store, whatever you call the store, like a thrift store. I think that's the term, a thrift store. And so she buys the candlesticks, and that's part of the mystery. It's like, okay, well, somebody attacked Mr. Labard and stole his stuff only to sell it for $5? What's that? So robbery clearly wasn't the culprit's main motive. Maybe the main motive was murder. Also, when Chauncey was discovered, he was knocked out and he had this really large Frankenstein mask on his head. And it could have killed him because he had the tracheotomy. So, he has trouble breathing normally. Did the culprit know that? Was the culprit actually trying to kill him or not? That's something she wonders. Suspects in the mystery are the next door neighbor who's been trying to sell the house forever. also his estranged brother, who really, really hates him. Sammy talks to them. They live right. Sammy talks to the brother and his wife, and they live fairly close to the thrift store. And those are basically the things that happen in this mystery. We also have the two police officers. The one police officer from the previous book, Officer Borsch. She's got a new partner who's Mr. Muscles, is what they call him, and they're like good cop, bad cop. Okay, Mr. Muscles is very nice to Sammy, whereas Officer Borsch hates her and doesn't want her involved in the mystery whatsoever. So let me switch gears and talk about the school drama in this book. The school drama in this book is that Heather's being mean again. Heather Costa still hates Sammy for whatever reason. So Heather's been making, I wouldn't call them prank phone calls, but they sort of are. She's been calling this one guy and pretending to be Sammy. And it's just like, oh, I love you so much. Kissy, kissy phone calls like that. And so his girlfriend, Amber, is furious. Amber being the most popular girl in school. And so she is really mad, and she chews out Sammy in front of a big audience. And now everybody thinks Sammy is this like weirdo who makes desperate phone calls. And Sammy wants to prove her innocence. So the way she does this is by going to a costume party. She goes to Heather's big costume party, and she has to wear a disguise. So she dresses up like a princess, which is something she would never do. And she pretends to be Dot's cousin. And she does make friends with Heather. And I actually kind of like that. It's kind of, I wouldn't say like this is really deep, heavy stuff, but it was interesting to see Sammy kind of bond with her nemesis and see that, oh, well, Heather's maybe not the worst person ever. Heather has big problems with her mother, who is just a shameless flirt, like kind of flirting with these 8th graders because mom still thinks she's in her 20s, and Heather hates that. And, I thought that was interesting because Sammy's home life situation isn't so good either. She hasn't seen her mom in a long time. We barely hear anything about mom in this book. But I do think that this book was a bit more straightforward or upfront about the situation with Sammy's mom. Similar thing with the nosy lady next door, Miss Graybill, where she's got this letter, and Sammy, for a second, tries to grab the letter and steal the letter and read it, and then she sees it's addressed to Daisy, and she's like, oh, Miss Graybill probably wasn't always an angry old lady who spies on her neighbors. She was probably young. She's probably like me when she was a kid. And so Sammy just kind of gives the letter back instead of stealing it. And I thought that was interesting too. So it's kind of giving more depth, more layers to the various villain characters. So, I mean, that makes sense. I like that. Anyway, getting back to the story, she what Sammy does is she places a baby monitor underneath Heather's bed, and then she tape records. That way she can tape record whatever Heather is saying when Heather's on the bed. And she purposely calls Heather and says mean things to Heather, and that basically goads Heather into making another one of those prank phone calls. That way Sammy can record the prank phone call, and she plays it for the entire school over the PA system, which is just crazy times. What she should have done is gone straight to Amber and played it for Amber, maybe, instead of like publicly humiliating Heather. And so Amber, the girlfriend, just kind of goes crazy and starts attacking Heather, and big deal, everybody gets suspended. I don't know what happened. Did we hear what happened to Amber? I forget if Amber gets suspended or not, because they have a big conference with Heather and Heather's mom and Sammy and her grandma and the principal, I believe, Mr. Kane. So I don't quite remember his name. And Sammy basically wins. She gets her way out of trouble by putting on like these earrings that Heather had loaned to her. And she basically goads Heather into attacking her, and that way Heather looks kind of unstable. And that way Sammy sort of gets off easy, and she's given just 20 hours of community service. And I'm told that, she's doing her community service at the local church, which is where the next book picks up. We're going to have a mystery there at the church. So that works. I think I might have, I might have preferred the school drama in the previous book more. I feel like that was more satisfying with a wrap-up, whereas this one feels a lot more like, oh, it's a to-be-continued story. However, I did like how this one had more depth to the characters. So, and I like Dot. She's a fine new character. So, I don't know if I like the social drama better in the first book or in this book. I think it works better in this book, and then overall this book is a little better because it doesn't have as much exposition and introducing who the characters are. Like I said earlier with the mom, the way that's handled, it's just quick explanation and done. I feel like that's better. Instead, like the first book kind of dragged that out before giving the explanation. So I feel like this book did a much better job of setting up the series regulars. One of the regulars we see is Hudson. He shows up a lot. Sammy goes to his place a lot. He and Grams apparently are close. I don't know if they're going to start dating or something. That seems to be where the book is implying it. Now, I did like the mystery solution in the first book better because there were like 2 to 3 different clues, whereas and they came together in a nice way, so you could sort of solve the mystery on your own. Whereas in this book, it's one of those cases where Sammy just happens to hear the right thing at the right time, and that's how she solves the mystery. So, let me see. I'm trying to remember. She goes to Mr. Labard's house and realizes that the culprit actually stole a bunch of valuable books and just replaced them with like fake old books. And that's what the culprit was really after. So there's like $5,000 books. These are like really, really expensive first edition books. And Mr. Labard just happens to mention the bookstore owner, who shows up a few times. The bookstore owner is the culprit. Spoilers. I should have said spoilers before saying who the culprit is. He calls the bookstore owner by his first name. And then just later that day, Sammy has a realization when she hears somebody talk about, oh, hello, Daisy. Hello, Mr. Greenwhite. And she's like, wait a minute. You only call somebody by their first name if you're good friends with them, if you know them well, right? So therefore, she realizes, oh, the victim knows the bookstore owner very well. They're on a first name basis. And that's kind of a big deal, especially because we know that the victim is sort of a loner and doesn't talk to other people. He's like in a house by himself all day long with no electricity. He's cut off from the rest of the world and his previous friends. So this causes her to realize, well, the bookstore owner is good friends with the victim. Well, the bookstore owner is probably the culprit. And so she goes into his bookstore and breaks into his desk, and sure enough, the stolen books are there. Like I said, that's not as good of a satisfying of a mystery solution as the previous book. It was more like, well, she was just kind of lucky that the victim just happened to mention the bookstore owner by his first name. And then she made a little leap in logic. Just because the bookstore owner is on a first name basis with the victim doesn't mean he's the culprit. But I also saw somebody complain, well, that's illegally obtained evidence because she stole it from him. They can't use that in court. Well, I did like how she defeats the victim, just like defeats the culprit, just like the previous book. She kind of, all she has is a toaster, so she like ties him up with a toaster and threatens to stick his hands in a toaster, which is kind of silly. But so those are like my overall thoughts on the book. It's an okay series. It's a very good series, and I can understand why it's popular. And these books have been out for 20 years, and they're still being printed, so people are still buying them. So yeah, I'd say it's okay. So thanks for watching my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned next month. I'll probably review the third book in the series. Bye.